Good morning. Welcome to the Art History Festival, organised by the Association for Art History, and this morning's careers webinar, breaking into the art world. My name is Christina Bradstreet. I'm the head of programs at the Association for Art History. And this week is, as I say, our Art History Festival. It's our 5th year of running the festival, which we established to really celebrate and promote art history, because we want more people to know what art history is and why it matters, to understand that it is for everyone. It's not an elitist subject. And most of all, to understand that this is something that everyone can enjoy and participate in. We also really wanted people to kind of better connect with the idea that the experiences with art that we all, or many of us, enjoy, for example, if you go to an exhibition at a museum or gallery, comes to us through the work and the research of art historians. So it's all about promoting and celebrating art history. And this morning's webinar is all about careers and really about supporting those people who are new to this area, wanting to get started, getting a foothold into a career in the art world. But I think there'll be lots here that's also very relevant to those who want to work more generally in the arts or the creative industries as well. So we've got until 12:30 for this event. We've got 3 speakers, each speaking for 20 minutes, and then we'll have lots of time for questions. So one thing I would really say to you is to try to get the most out of this session. So if you have a question that's niggling at you, please do write it in the Q&A box, really as soon as you think of it, because that will help me to prepare. I'll try and get through as many questions as we can in the Q&A, and see what questions are kind of coming up the most for people. We'll get started. I'll just say to you, you might see people wandering around behind me. That's because I'm actually in a Starbucks, having had a bit of an internet emergency this morning. I couldn't get onto the internet where I was expecting to. So I hope that's not too distracting for you. Okay, so we've got 3 speakers this morning. We'll be hearing from Ricky Orton and Henry Dowson. Ricky is the marketing executive and Henry Dowson associate curator at Artique, and they're going to be talking about careers, collaboration and fair practice in the creative industries. We'll then be hearing from Diana Ewer, who is head of careers at Sotheby's Institute, actually a role that I held in the past. She's going to be talking about building your professional future, CVs and cover letters for a career in the art world. And then we'll be hearing from Alexander Steinacker Clark, who runs the All About Art podcast, and also a networking organization as well, which she'll tell you more about. She's going to be talking about practical do's and don'ts of networking and how to build a robust network that lasts. Okay, so I'm going to hand you over now to Ricky to talk more about careers, collaboration and fair practice in the creative industries. Thanks, Ricky.
Thank you, Christina. I'm just going to start by pulling up my slides quickly. Fantastic. So good morning, everyone. Welcome. As Christina mentioned, my name is Ricky. I am the marketing executive at Artique. Artique, for a bit of context, just before we get into this, we are an international art agency operating in Europe, US, the UK, and certain areas of Asia at the moment, growing quite rapidly. But we curate art collections for workplace, residential and hospitality clients. And we, as a part of our mission, really make an effort to demonstrate that creative careers have economic viability. We have an art rental model that provides sustainable income to artists that rent our artworks for sort of set periods of time. And as part of that, we do several events like this, where we talk to individuals entering the creative industries. A large proportion of our team come from creative backgrounds. I myself have a degree in fine art. Henry, sort of more of an art historical background. But we've all sort of ended up in a variety of roles, be that project coordinators, art consultants, myself in marketing. So Henry's going to talk a bit today about his sort of career journey, how his art history degree has impacted his sort of professional development. And I'm going to round us out with some sort of practical careers and collaboration advice on growing your sort of personal brand and your digital presence. So I'll pass over to Henry now to chat with you first.
Thank you so much, Ricky. Yeah, and thank you, Christina, as well for sorting this out. It's something that's incredibly close to my heart, and it's something that I hope you will gain some information from today. What I'm going to be talking about today, as Ricky mentioned, is I'm going to talk you through some touch points in my career, how art history really instigated some moments within that, and then specifically kind of some outtakes, some kind of hot takes that I have from that. I think it's really important to share these moments, especially with graduates, with people starting their journeys. So a little tiny bit about me before we get going. So I've been working in the art world for around a decade, bit more, working across lots of different places. Look, I grew up in a space that wasn't exactly filled with art, and I mean, I wouldn't call my family and friends kind of Philistines, but it was close enough. I didn't have that kind of initial culture kind of just like influx at that young age. I actually found it myself. I was very lucky to have a very engaged arts teacher when I was younger. Taught me some amazing art and actually allowed me to think creatively in a space which, to be honest, wasn't that creative. Through that time, I actually began to really understand what art meant to me and how perspectives can be shared in a visual way. That was something that really kind of ignited a creative fire in my body. From then, I went to do an undergrad in Leeds, and it was there that it really kind of took off. Studied art history at Leeds. It was an incredible journey there, starting from a very singular vision of what art and art history could be, before by the end having my mind completely opened into realistically the limitations of my own knowledge, but actually the understanding of art at large, and actually learning about different cultures around the world and different practices around the world. I was lucky to have a fantastic lecturer and mentor there, which I think is really important, by the name of Will Ree, someone that I still keep in contact with today. I think it's really important to keep contacts close to you in order to kind of lean back on, keep that mentorship going. And I would really extend my arm to kind of any of you, if you're interested in curatorship, please hit me up. I'm sure there's going to be some kind of detail shared afterwards. From that, I actually developed my passion, and I think this is a really important piece of my career. You learn about art, you want to kind of be immersed further in it. I was learning a lot about the Southern African and West African art in that time. I felt a little bit distanced from it locationally, and about what my place is within that cohort of art and within the world. I actually went over to Ghana and Nigeria. I spent about 8 months there, and specifically growing my knowledge of grassroots arts action in the area. It's something that I'm really interested in. Coming from my background, I wanted to understand how people instigate artistic moments. And then I followed that up with writing an MA thesis, and ultimately my whole kind of master's course on it at SOAS. Now, during that time in SOAS, I was actually constantly on the lookout for other opportunities. And I ended up collaborating with 2 other students at that point to form a collective. Our collective was called Superglue. The idea was that it was gluing different cultures together and understanding how different artists across the world react to similar themes. What's really important there, though, is we were starting to understand how to work with each other across different geographical locations, but also different perspectives, and really gaining a kind of rounded view of how to work and how art is important across the world. Because I fundamentally believe that art is not only important, but it has the real potentiality for change. And I think that's where I was kind of fired out into the job seeking world. unfortunately, I came out at a time in the midst of COVID. That time was pretty tricky to say the least. People weren't hiring. So you had to do stuff by yourself. And luckily, I was in a position there where I had worked on various exhibitions. I'd spent time with fellow students, taking the time to really kind of build that connection and understand the different facets of the world of art a bit clearer. However, coming out into the job seeking world, I found it really hard. I found it hard to find my place within the art world, and where that kind of landed for me, after, to be honest, a lot of trial and error. And I think that is something that I really am grateful for in a way, because, you know, I grafted very hard trying to find the right fit for what I wanted to do. So I worked in the private art world. I worked for, you know, galleries such as 1957, Ed Cross, Mossy Tunya. I worked for 154. Following that, I actually worked at the V&A. So I did a couple of curatorial assistant jobs there, most specifically with Africa Fashion, which is a big exhibition in 2019, I think, or 2020. And that was a real key turning point for me. It was understanding that, okay, being in the curating world is something that I really relish and that I want to do. During that time, I was able to kind of speak to real industry professionals in that, and they, again, are still people that I call on today. You know, I've spent all this time working in the art world, but, you know, I think people have so much information to give, and when you reach a dead end, it's probably not a dead end. You just need a bit of a leg up, to be honest with you. With regards to that, I then worked in the V&A for a little bit before actually working for Arctic. So I started at Arctic about 3.5 years ago. What really drew me to this space, I think it's quite rare in the art world to find something that is really arts focused. I know that sounds like a kind of counterintuitive, but something about Arctic that is really important and really aligns with my values is they really foreground the artist and the art. It's something that I think is incredibly important. I think that is that kind of bolstering of the creative industries, but also of the artistic opportunities, was something that really kind of drew me to that. During my time, you know, from university to through the art sectors, I'd always worked with charities as well, and kind of using art as a way to better people. And Arctic really does that. You know, it fills spaces with art. I know that sounds like a kind of very simple thing, but what really that is it's allowing people to enjoy art who maybe might not see art. I think that is what kind of drew me, because in a way, that's how I view my kind of growing up, my instances, you know, letting people enjoy art and find the kind of interest in art that I've managed to enjoy from the people who aren't necessarily kind of have the access to that is something that I'm really, really passionate about. And that is kind of where I am at the moment. So I work with kind of 2 or 3 different charities: a disabled arts charity in North London called Artbox, a charity called St Vincent's in South London, alongside Arctic, and kind of working all these different like aspects into it and really enriching my brain with cultural and creative opportunities. And what I have just done, so I've just curated a big 11-person art show. It's situated in Hypha Studios in Stratford. And the idea behind that is it's all about artistic process. So what I've done is I've allowed artists to really demystify how they're creating art. And the idea behind that is that people can come in and really have access to how stuff is made, to how the artworks evolve from, you know, initial sketch into finalized piece. And I think that is something that I'm really passionate about. And that is how I kind of found my passion, is finding the accessibility for audiences to enjoy art and fundamentally find the potentiality of art for social change, for personal change, and for often like economic change within the artists and within these art spaces in general. So that's, I appreciate that's a very, very kind of broad brush strokes. But I think the key kind of takeaways from this, just to sum up, would be really value your contacts. Those contacts are your peers in your BA, in your MA. They're your lecturers. They're, you know, they could even be a sibling who's been working. You know, use these contacts and use these contacts to understand deeper how you fit within the art world and where you want to mine out your specific position. Develop your passion, find out what it is you want to do within the art world and develop that. Work on it and use that kind of hard graft to really get there, because the payoff, I promise you, is amazing. We're very lucky to work in creative industries and not work crunching numbers the whole time. I'm going to leave it at that. I'm going to hand back over to Ricky, who's going to tell you a little bit about the marketing side of things. And yeah, thanks again. And again, I'll share my email and contact details. If any of you have any questions offline, if you want to connect, anything, please hit me up. Yeah.
Thank you, Henry. So yeah, as Henry mentioned, Henry and I work together at Arctic, and as marketing executive, I spend a lot of my time online. So reflecting on what practical advice I could give to you all today, I really want to take the opportunity to talk about personal branding and digital presence. So around 70% of creative jobs will now involve checking an online portfolio, be this Instagram, LinkedIn, a personal website. And especially in the arts, visual industry, your professional standing is often shaped by how effectively you can convey your visual taste and your creative judgment. And I think it's really important to take the time to reflect on what the first impression you want to be of you, your brand, your interests, your work. So what is sort of personal branding as sort of a top line? It is the story you tell about yourself, your skills, your values, your aesthetics, and importantly, your personality. I really enjoyed this quote by the fashion designer Marc Ecko, which sort of drives home the fact that whether we like to or not, we all exist online nowadays, and we do have a presence that employers will seek out. And it's important to recognize that that exists, and you can be in control of how that makes you appear. In the creative industries, your personal brand is a really effective tool to differentiate yourself in what is a crowded market and to communicate your sort of professionalism and your consistency. This can include your research interests, your past collaborations, personal projects, critical opinions and reviews on the work of others. And it involves a distinctive visual style across all these platforms and a consistent voice across sort of posts and content. So breaking down a personal brand, it sort of comes down to 4 key elements. I've used the white pube as an example here because they sort of perfectly demonstrate this idea of distinctive visual style, consistent voice. So we'll start with a website. The website is sort of your central hub for your best work. It should be simple to navigate, and really importantly, your contact information should be easy to find. This is a great space to highlight your strongest projects, and it's important to save some work to discuss in interviews or presentations from your portfolio that will make it feel fresh and engaging. Your portfolio then is a more comprehensive document detailing all of your work, experiences, and achievements. It can be shared digitally or in print formats for more formal applications. And you can often put both websites or portfolios behind password protection if it's not something that you want to be public to everyone. Then you come to your social media. This is platforms where your audiences are active. So Instagram often for visual arts, LinkedIn for networking, Substack for written text, etc. And then you have your professional CV. This should be well designed, up to date, and it would be great when possible to have a clear professional headshot to hand. But Diana will speak more on CVs later. Across all of these, it's really valuable to have a unified color scheme, bio and tone so that people can recognize your brand across channels. I think the White Pube demonstrate this really, really effectively. Another small tip I would recommend is that on your social media, on your website, on your CV, on your portfolio, have your name really clear. If you don't want people to find certain channels, I think it's you can go ahead and call your Instagram whatever you want. But nowadays we do search by name or whatever it is you go by professionally. That doesn't have to be your full given name, but make sure it's consistent and makes it easy for people to find you. So approaching yourself as a brand can often feel odd, but there are several benefits to a sort of consistent digital presence and to treating yourself as the service you offer. It increases your visibility. Strong website, clear handles, as I mentioned earlier, often help clients and employers find you, even if you're not actively job hunting. It increases your credibility. It shows that you treat your craft as a profession and not just a hobby. It can bring about a number of opportunities. Oftentimes collaborations, speaking opportunities, freelance work will come through online discovery. And it also, as I mentioned briefly earlier, controls your narrative. It helps you decide your story before others do. I think it's a great opportunity putting all of this together to define your values. And in defining your values, you have the agency to align yourself with companies and brands that reflect your priorities. So I want to take the opportunity to build some sort of practical steps. How then do you approach building your own personal brand? I think the first thing to do is really reflect on those core values. What are your interests? What are your unique selling points? And then pick 3 key descriptors to guide your brand. Then research who you want to reach out to and how you might stand out. What do people need? What do others offer? And how can you do it differently or better, given your unique selling points, your research, your interests, your values? Then audit your current profiles and remove any outdated work or content that doesn't align with those words that you've used to define your brand. The next step is to begin scheduling regular updates. This can be monthly portfolio refreshes, weekly social posts, but make sure to put the time in to build this as a growing piece of work. And don't be afraid to share the process behind this, as well as finished products, to build authenticity and show your process. Importantly, prioritize quality over quantity. Then on those online platforms, make sure you're engaging with your network. Comment with thoughtfully, credit collaborators, follow people that inspire you, and don't be afraid to reach out to them and let them know that you share similar interests, you really engage with X piece of work, it really reminded you of Y piece of work. Next tip is to protect your work by adding copyright or usage terms. As I mentioned earlier, some people prefer to use password protected portfolios if appropriate. I know it's an important thing to consider, and I think it's a great way to protect your intellectual property. The next thing I recommend is to set boundaries. Your brand does not need to be corporate and professional. You can approach your online presence like a digital sketchbook or a professional network, or authentically mix your personal life and your work. Whatever boundaries you set, I think it's really important to ensure that they reflect the kind of places you want to end up. So for example, if your goal is to work at Dazed, you can emphasize sort of edgy, experimental, and visually dynamic branding. You can share sort of personal projects, collaborations with small indie brands, or commentary on contemporary culture. And it makes sense for a profile to mix lifestyle, art, and professional work to demonstrate your creativity and individuality. On the flip side, if your goal is to work at Christie's, it makes sense to focus on a polished, professional, and more research-driven personal brand. It's great to highlight academic writing, exhibition curations, or speaking engagements, and a more formal, authoritative tone will demonstrate your expertise and credibility to a more traditional sector of the art world. I'd also recommend, and I sort of put this note as make a mountain out of a molehill. I think we often hold ourselves back waiting for big milestones to update our portfolio, Instagram, etc. But it's great to review exhibitions, create small shows, attend free events, and network. Alexandra will give further tips on that later. But we often worry that we don't have enough experience or credibility to shout about our successes. But every small step matters, and every experience comes with learning opportunities. So don't wait to seek those out, share what it is you've learned, and apply for things before you feel ready. You'll never be done with a portfolio, a website, a personal brand. It's meant to be a growing entity, and there's always going to be more to add. Like you as a person, you will grow and develop with time and experience, as will your brand. And to employers, sort of going back to more of a careers and professional development viewpoint, devoted, consistent engagement with your industry is invaluable to employers and will help you better understand who you are and how you want to work. Collaboration, as Henry touched on, is also really valuable. Engage with communities like the Association for Art History, university alumni networks, or online resources like Creative Lives in Progress. They're an excellent opportunity to gain resources, mentors, exposure, grow your network, and to define what it is you want to do with your life. Big question, not one that you need to answer straight away, but every small step towards it will help. For inspiration on different branding styles, formats, and layouts, I would recommend using platforms like Pinterest, Behance, Creative Review, and It's Nice That. Sorry, that's my 10-minute timer going off. But there's a great opportunity to explore some resources, look at how you might want to present yourself. This might simply just be a color palette or a font choice, but they're great resources to get you going. Developing your personal brand is an investment in your creative career, and it will take time. But before the weekends, I would recommend every one of you try updating one part of your unknown profile or sharing a piece of work you are proud of. It's a small step, but definitely one in the right direction. And doing so will increase your visibility, credibility, and open doors to opportunities that valuably align with your skills, style, and professional goals. If you have any further questions, much like Henry, I'm really happy for you to reach out. I'm sure our contact information will be shared at the end, but for now, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Ricky. It was really inspiring to hear about Henry's journey, and actually I found the talk on personal branding really helpful myself when I'm mid-career, but it's also exciting to hear that you can get started right now, whatever stage you're at. We'll take questions at the end, so I'll hand over straight away to Diana Ewer, Head of Careers at Sotheby's Institute. She's been talking more about CVs and cover letters, the do's and don'ts.
Thank you so much, Christina, and thank you to Ricky and Henry. I mean, that was a fantastic insight into personal branding. I'm just going to share my screen. Just bear with me. How's that looking?
That's it. Thank you.
Wonderful. Okay, everyone, so let's get started. So today I'm going to be looking at CV and cover letters, a career in the art world. This is going to be quite an information-heavy session. So please bear with me. I will be able to share the slides at the end of the session, should you want further information. So let's get going. You really need your CV to basically sell your story. Why you? and why can you stand apart from others? So your CV needs to be crucially relevant. And you really need to look at each role as you go to approach in looking at your CV and match your knowledge, your skill, and your key competencies and experience to the job that you're looking at. And when we talk about knowledge, skills, and key competencies, I just want to break that down. Knowledge is your art history degree. Skills are going to be hard and soft skills, skills being languages, computer skills. Key competencies are more about behavioral traits with looking at perhaps good communication and experience, any experience to date. And whether you've been volunteering or whether you've been working in the student bar, this is all relevant experience that'll take you forward. It needs to be specific. So do think about using stats within your CV and to show measurable results as well. So you want to have really practical examples of your professional experience to date and your academic credentials. And finally, you want to tailor that CV. You want to tailor it to every single job application that you do. And you need to think about that person specification. So every job is going to have a person specification that goes with it. And you need to think about who you're sending your CV to. Who is that person? If it's a hiring manager, find out who they are and write to them directly. If it's an application tracking system, an ATS, this is where AI is coming into it. We know that the recruitment space is changing rapidly. I do believe within the creative industries, because we're based on so many small to medium-sized businesses, I feel confident that really people are still looking at applications. For example, we know the Sotheby's internship that just happened. They had a team looking at that across all the CVs. So this is where we are currently, but things will be changing in the future, and that's something to be mindful of. So just to kick off some very basic do's and don'ts about your CV. I would look towards a very professional, simple design. Don't go crazy. In the UK, really, you're looking at 2 pages maximum, 11 to 12 point, and think about having some headers in bold and some bullet points. This is always a really useful way to break things down a bit. When we're talking about contact details, it's very interesting hearing from Ricky about personal brands. And this is where this feeds into it. Right at the top, when you're leaving your contact details, you only really need to give a very basic address, but there it's crucially important. I tell all my students at Sotheby's Institute of Art to include a LinkedIn profile. You may yourselves not be using LinkedIn so much, but my generation is very much the hiring sort of go-to space. So I would include that, build up a LinkedIn profile. It's a fantastic way to network online. And you also want to include your either a link to Instagram or a link to your website, which ties into the importance of personal branding. I do also want to highlight a less encouraging space that we're in right now. I do believe that it's definitely worth considering putting a line somewhere in your CV, eligible to work in the UK with full right to work status, just so all employers are very clear on where you are currently. So section headers are very helpful. We have the breakdown there. You can have a professional profile, something that we'll go on to discuss in a minute. I'm very much like to see a professional profile. I've hired many people over the years, having worked in the commercial art world for 20. I like a profile because it gives you an immediate snapshot of where someone is, who they are, what their background is, and what their future career aspirations are. Then moving into the education, I think many of you are currently at undergrad level, so I would prioritize having your education up front, then followed by relevant work experience. And I mean by sector relevant to the creative industries. And you want to start making sure that you're consistent with your timelines. So you start with your most recent, having that in the present, and then you go down into the past when you have obviously moved on from those roles. Do include everything that you've done. It's all relevant, just as Ricky referred to. And then also don't forget that other work experiences I've touched on, whether you've done volunteering or whether you've done events management, hospitality. These is all fantastic, valuable experience that should go on your CV. So have a section for relevant work experience and then a section for other work experience, should you wish to split the two. And then a skill section. That's really important. Skill section is where you can talk about your hard skills, languages, your digital proficiency. You really want to to make sure that you outline those clearly on your CV. And then don't forget certifications, affiliations, membership organizations. It all shows that you've got a really wide understanding on what's going on at the moment. Projects, publications, and relevant volunteer experience and interest. On the publications, I do think it's also something that you can include live links within your CV. People often would appreciate that as an employer, that they can go and look at see what you've published, what you've worked on, and to finally save as a PDF. And that means your format doesn't move. So some basic don'ts, just to go through this quickly, because we don't want to focus on the negatives, but do keep yourself to some readable fonts. Avoid fancy designs. We are all using AI, but importantly, use it as a tool to enhance your CV, enriching it, rather than to just make you sound like a generic bot. It's very important not to use it as a crutch. You can see when someone has used AI too much. You really need to keep your authentic voice running through your CV. We've talked about including experience, but don't list absolutely everything you've done. Think carefully and strategically about what you're putting there. Everything that goes on your CV needs to be there for a reason. Avoid exaggerating your experience. You are undergraduates, or you've recently graduated, or you're even thinking on going to do an art history degree. You're not meant to have done everything yet, that you have your whole career ahead of you. Avoid generic phrases, keen team player, for example. We do not include photographs on our CVs in the UK. It's different across Europe, so be aware of style differences. But why I tell my students at Sotheby's Institute is that by including a LinkedIn profile or including your Instagram or your personal brand website, that is where an employer will go to have a look and further understand who you are. So that's the space to make sure, if you wish to have a photo, that's how you can do that. And then also, very crucially, don't forget to proofread. It's really important. Get others to have a look at your CV. Don't be afraid to ask for help. It's always helpful to have multiple eyes on your CV before it goes out. So a professional profile is really your why pitch. It's a summary of who you are professionally, and it needs to be short, 2 or 4 concise sentences about who you are. It's going to be a summary of your current role, your current situation. If you're currently studying, that's absolutely fine. Your expertise and past academic experience, your work experience, and then what you want to go on and do. You want to be outlining your future career ambitions. What are your goals? And don't forget, if you can interweave that with some key skills and competencies, that would be really, really fantastic. So just a basic outline of education. When you are putting down your education, I would definitely include all the details of your institution. Do include your grade. Some people are a bit reluctant to, but I always like to see them on CVs. Don't forget to list your specialisms. Art history degrees are fantastic in terms of demonstrating people's abilities to do research, good, strong communication and written skills. So put that down. Include your scholarships. Also, it's very interesting if you have, for example, been a class rep, it shows that you're really willing to get involved in the whole community. So do also include that. Relevant work experience. As I touched on before, it's really important to include some stats, some further detail. You know, if you've worked within a team, how many people within the team? If you're handling artworks, are they simple or complicated? Where? You want to be threading through your skills as well. Make it clear that you're highly skilled, that you're working to the highest of industry standards. So just really think about some of that proactive language. And you also want to show that not only have you got the practical skills, but you also underpin that with some strong administration skills as well. So think about your roles and your job and your experience in the whole, every aspect of what you've been working on while you've been doing the day-to-day. Other work experience we've touched on, just how important it is to include your transferable work experience, your transferable skills. Employers are interested in meeting a rich diversity of people coming for their jobs. So don't be afraid to include other things if you feel like you do not have enough relevant sector experience. We talk a lot about skills, and I just wanted to touch on hard skills. For me, they're the most important to highlight on a CV. You want to showcase your technical and practical skills, whether that's art handling, picture handling, exhibition installation is a good example. Highlight your languages. Think about your certifications, your relevant training. First aid, for example, is a great thing to have. And then also, you are of a generation where AI is absolutely kind of crucial. It's going to be playing a really important part of your creative careers. You want to demonstrate a very high level of digital proficiency. And if you can show that you've got some kind of knowledge of the sort of CMRS systems that the sector's using, whether that's ArtNet, ArtLogic, etc., Art Salesforce, like these are all great things to outline on your CV. We've talked a bit about quantifiable data. These are just some questions you can answer yourself while you're writing up your CV and you're honing your skills section. You know, what was the size of the clientele that was in your exhibition? How many people were impacted, for example, by a social media campaign you worked on? What percentage did you exceed your goal? How much revenue did you generate for the company? I've also included here some useful action verbs that you can use across your CV to really show how driven you are. So my key takeaways for your CV: think about the format, keep it simple. There are lots of different CV formats that you can download online, and I'll touch on those later. But I do think that still having a very simple CV and a simple layout is the more attractive for the employer. Think about using live links so people can click through to find out more about you. Focus on your achievements and not just your duties, and put some stats in there, some quantifiable data. Have some measurable outcomes to sell your story. So we really want to think about relevant knowledge, skills, and key competencies. And just to recap on what they are: your knowledge is your academic, your BA, your MA. Your skills are your practical abilities, whether you're very good at using Google Analytics, for example, your languages. Your key competencies are behavioral strengths, leadership, adaptability, communication. And the brilliant thing about being an art history graduate is that your degree will set you up so perfectly for all these things. You really want to sell that. And finally, your experience, your work roles, but also your internships. And don't forget your extracurricular, whether you've been involved in clubs and societies. And finally, don't forget to proofread and tailor your CV for everything that you're going to apply for. So moving on to a good cover letter. The important thing about your cover letter is it's going to be the story that you're telling about who you are. So it's not just your CV on repeat. The employer already has your CV. So you really want your cover letter to set you apart from others. And I have this sort of the 3 whys. This is your golden opportunity to showcase what they are. And it's so simple. You want to think about why the company or why the brand that you're interested in working for. Really break down what it means to you and what it means to you personally. Why does this company resonate with you more than others? Why the role? I know that seems really obvious, but why is the role of interest to you? What is the potential of the role in terms of career development? Why is it relevant to the sector now? And then why you? Why you rather than somebody else? And if you authentically consider those 3 whys, you will go on to write a really good cover letter. It's a sort of tried and tested format. And I think also within this, we've talked about it already with the CV, but it's a bit like a repeat. You want to make sure you identify your skills and your key competencies and your education and work experience to align with the role that you're applying for. So again, just some basic do's with your cover letter. Always have a formal but personalized greeting. Find out who you're writing to. Get a name and get a title. It means a lot rather than just writing to a hiring manager. With your address as well, it's also an opportunity to include a link to your social media, and it's also an opportunity to include a link to your LinkedIn if you wish to. You want to clarify the role that you're applying for. I know that seems really obvious, but you want to be clear what the role is and where you found it. Use the language from the job description, and you want to make a really good impact from the start. You want to show that you've got really good, clear understanding of the company and the role that you're applying for, and then connect those dots back to you and share those 3 whys. Highlight your experience, your skills again, and really finish with just a sort of confident close of why you really want to be working there. 1 page only. You really don't want to send in 3, 4, 5-page cover letter. People do not have the time to read it. You want concise. You want 3 to 4 paras. Use your fantastic written communication skills that you've honed being an undergraduate. Keep your font readable. 12 font, again, it's really good. Proofread it and proofread it again. If you're going to include links, which I think again is super effective, make sure that they work and that they're functioning properly. And when you go on to save it, really obvious thing, put your name there as also with your CV, because it's often, if you're getting multiple applications at one time, it's very hard to sort of identify who's who. So be very clear on how you're labeling your letter and your CV. So my key takeaways for the cover letter is to make sure that you're tailoring your applications for the art world. You're highlighting your creativity, your cultural awareness, and your knowledge of the organization, which is relevant to the sector. Make sure you're showcasing your achievements, your research projects, your exhibition, publications, collaborations, or any part-time work that is relevant to the role that you've applied for. And then do remember, use this as an opportunity to tell your story. You know, show a really genuine interest in the role, and you can frame your life experiences as key assets for your future career trajectory. So I did just want to touch briefly on AI. It's a great tool to have, and you know, do use it. It's great for analyzing job descriptions. What key skills are in this job description? Really help you spell it out. It's also really helpful for salary ranges. And for identifying sector trends. So don't be shy of using AI, but you must make sure that it doesn't replace your personal voice. This here is a list of some useful AI tools that you can use for CV and cover letter work. I'd be happy to share this presentation, and I would take some time to take a look at them. It's really good for interview practice. I do just want to note that this is a space that's changing rapidly. So do take a look, but the details may be changing going forward. This also here is a list of job sites that I often share with my students. They're a great opportunity. Start taking a look now, see what sort of job opportunities are out there. And if they have mailing lists, do sign up. And then we have the art recruiters. Within the sector, we have some key recruiters. These recruiters are listed here: Draw, Lacey West, and Sophie McPherson. They are wonderful in terms of what they're doing to contribute to bringing the sector in line with other sectors. And they're often running workshops and events in collaboration with others. Alexandra will go on to speak about this. They're doing some fantastic work, Sophie McPherson, for example, with NextGen. I do urge you now to go on, check out their websites. You might not be ready to hand your CV in yet to them, that's fine, but make sure you subscribe to their newsletter, because they're going to be sharing regular relevant content for you and updates and reports, so do that now. Sharing a couple of other resources. Keep your head in the space when you're looking at going on to apply for jobs. Podcasts, absolutely brilliant way to have some really good overview of what's going on in our sector. Those are some of my favorites. I've obviously got Alexandra Steiner-Clark's there. Alexandra, I listened to your fantastic recent one you did about how to break into the sector. Highly recommend that you subscribe to her podcast, and there's some great publications there too. And just to close, I think when you're looking to apply for a job in the art world, there's lots of talk about the sector being very opaque, very difficult to break into if you don't have contacts. I myself came from a long military background. I did not have any contacts in the art world. I was drawn to art history from an English teacher. I then went on to do a BA at Manchester University. I think that when I reflect about my fantastic cohort, I'm still in touch with now, I look at who we are. We are, myself, we're an art consultant, we're an arts PR specialist, but we also have a world-renowned chef, We also have a barrister, and we also have a comms specialist. So I think you could do well to do some research on the sectors of growth and where your interests lie. And you want to consider your strategy and do your research. Build on your transferable skills and your knowledge bases. So I mean that don't be afraid. If you are working, for example, in the catering world, that's fine. Use that as experience and use that to build on as you go forward. Target relevant job sites and arts and luxury recruiters that I've outlined in the presentation. And I would consider taking on an arts-based membership. So I know that Alexandra will go on to speak about this, and also consider further study. You might be thinking about a master's and a postgraduate route. I think that's a fantastic thing to look at. And I would consider carefully what you might go on to study in terms of looking in the long term. We will be having a open day at the Institute coming up on the 22nd of November. So it'll be wonderful to see you there. Thank you so much for listening.
Thanks, Diana. You covered a lot of ground there, lots of important points in a short amount of time, really. I'm just going to highlight again what you said about typos and not having those. Just thinking of a recent round of recruitment that I was involved with, where someone was so close, I think, to reaching the interview selections file, but they'd spelt our organization name wrongly in their cover letter, and I just couldn't get past that. Maybe that's unfair, but could I trust that person, you know, when they're contacting, you know, our contacts and all of that. And then also just thank you, Diana, for saying about that you came into this industry without having those personal contacts. I think that's really important to say that although it's always helpful to build on the contacts that you may have, it's, you know, I was also somebody who started out not really knowing anyone in the field at all, but you do know your university lecturers. They were incredibly helpful to me. As Diana said, your peers on your course become your contacts as well, and it's just kind of nurturing all those relationships that you build along the way. We're going to hand over now to our final speaker, who is going to be talking about networking, and I'm sure we'll get into all of this, Alexandra Steinacker. We've already heard about her amazing podcast, All About Art, which actually focuses a lot on professional paths within the arts and cultural sector. So there's loads of really fascinating material on there, and it's actually amazingly or very impressively in the top 10% of most followed podcasts on Spotify. That's incredible. And she's also the co-director of NextGen, a networking program to support early careers art professionals. And in fact, she's taking time away from a networking event and the NextGen are running this morning to be with us. So I'm really glad that you were able to be with us today, Alexandra. Sandra, I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Christina. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm just going to share my screen, and then we're going to go full screen here. Hopefully everyone can see that. So as Christina said, I'm going to be talking today about building meaningful connections, thinking about networking within the arts. And we're going to be covering some of the practical strategies and the do's and don'ts for networking in the art world. So a little bit about me, just to start us off. As Diana and Christina have so kindly pointed out, I am the founder of the All About Art podcast, which has a focus on demystifying the professional art sector. So I do interview episodes. Christina has actually been on the podcast as well to talk about the Association for Art History. And I also do solo episodes where I do exhibition reviews, hot takes, that sort of thing. I am also the co-director of NextGen, which is a joint venture between All About Art and AWITA, which is the Association of Women in the Arts. And it's a membership platform for emerging arts professionals. So for people who are within the first 5 years of their career, or if they're doing a career pivot, it doesn't have to be their career in general. It can be just 5 years of their career in the arts. I'm also very active on social media, and the reason why I'm putting that there is because we are going to be talking about digital networking strategies in this presentation. And just for some more context, some of my previous job experience includes I was the gallery and exhibitions manager at Gallery Max Hetzler, and I've also worked at Skarstedt Gallery, Gallery Tedis Ropac, and Sotheby's Auction House. So why does networking matter in the art world? Well, the art world is incredibly relationship driven. I would say from what I heard from other people like friends and family in other sectors, it's more than in comparison to how other sectors are when it comes to relationships and how important a network is. So opportunities often come through personal connections, and trust and reputation are built through those connections. It's a multi-layered ecosystem. So there are artists, galleries, collectors, curators, critics, institutions, and so many others that I actually just didn't list here. There are so many different players, and each connection can open a different pathway. So, you know, if you're a sole trader, if you're a freelancer, thinking about getting business and working with different people, or if you're a gallerist, sure, of course, your focus can be on collectors, but it's also on artists. It's also on other galleries who you can collaborate with. It's also on curators who can come in and guest curate a show, on critics who are going to write about your show. There are on institutions who will hopefully exhibit your artist. You know, it's such a multi-layered ecosystem. And yeah, all of that can open up different opportunities. And it's important to keep in mind that when you're networking, you're building your professional identity, because how you present yourself shapes future opportunities. And having a consistent presence builds recognition and it builds credibility. I am living, breathing proof of that, because I wouldn't be where I am in my career if I hadn't put a lot of effort into my network. So today in this presentation, I'm going to be covering three main networking environments. We're going to look at online networking. We're going to look at what to do at an exhibition opening. And I'm going to briefly fly over some alternative scenarios for networking beyond the two aforementioned ones, just in case you're tired of being on social media and in case you don't want to go to an exhibition opening where you might get, you know, shoved because of a crowd being very big, because sometimes these exhibition openings can get very busy. But each environment requires different strategies and different skills. And so we're going to go over those. First case study that I'm covering, online networking. So here's the scenario. You're following up after a digital interaction. And so the situation is that you connected with an arts professional. One sec. Yeah, you've connected with an arts professional on LinkedIn after engaging with their post. So, and it doesn't have to be LinkedIn. It could be on Instagram, TikTok. It could be, you know, any sort of other situation. I wouldn't say necessarily anything outside of social media for this specific example, but I'm sure there are other ways that you can implement it creatively. But the way that the strategy is going to look is you have an initial engagement. You know that you want to connect with someone, you really respect what they do. And so you make a thoughtful comment on their post. And that will already be something that's contributing to an initial connection. And then once you make that thoughtful comment, to send a personalized message referencing the topic of the post. And then within that message that you're sending, depending on if it's on LinkedIn where you have a specific word count or like character count that you're allowed to send, you may need to think strategically about it. Or for example, on Instagram, when you're sending a message request, these message requests, I think you can, with some accounts, you can only send one message. So it is important to think strategically about what platform you're using and how you're going to reach out to someone using the tools that that platform allows. But then including like a follow-up suggestion of meeting in person or having a video call within 1 to 2 weeks. Now, the 1 to 2 weeks thing is a wibbly wobbly sort of thing that I'm going to touch on later in regards to kind of thinking about people's time, thinking about art world seasons, thinking about how busy people get. But I've also included a little sample message down below, and you can screenshot that or whatever's the most useful. But it's just, hi, blank, I really appreciated your insights about, you know, either like the post or like a specific thing. I'd love to speak to you more over coffee when you have time. Would you be interested in meeting? And then I think it's always good, if it's appropriate, to include a specific location, because I mean, if someone like works in central London and you live in South London, suggesting a cafe in South London obviously isn't the way to go. If you know that someone works, for example, at the Barbican, then it would be a really great idea to say, would you be interested in meeting for a coffee? I can come to the Barbican coffee shop and we can grab an oat latte or something. Or would you like to join me for the upcoming exhibition opening, for example? Like if you have an event that you really want to go to suggest that they join you at that event can be really great. It can be a really good way to kind of catch someone's attention and to also add value to the meeting. And then always adding a line, I'm happy to work around your schedule. I think that is a really good way to end a message, and just, showing that you're wanting to allow for flexibility, of course. Here we go. So online networking do's and don'ts. Do's: always aim for face-to-face meetings. So book coffee or exhibition visits. As I said, the latter with the exhibition visits, this offer can add value to the meeting. And I think that that's always a really cool thing to suggest. Also be specific in your outreach. Reference particular works or exhibitions they posted or content they produced. I have, I put it in the previous example, but it just means so much when you actually reference someone's work. It really shows that you are invested in meeting with this person because you want to hear about, their experiences, or it's very specific to that person and it doesn't feel like a generic outreach. And then do use your authentic voice. Don't over formalize your communication. And although I had included an example of a message that you can send on the previous slide, I would always suggest making it a little bit more personal and making sure that your authentic voice does shine through, but you can use that framework, but just make sure you put a little bit of your voice into it. Online networking don'ts: don't rely solely on digital interaction. Online is just the starting point. Don't send generic connection requests. That ties into what I said earlier. Don't follow up excessively. Respect their time and availability. And that ties into the next one. Don't expect immediate responses. People have busy schedules, and it's important to think about timing and art world seasons. What I mean by this is that once you reach out to someone once in the art world, I don't actually think that reaching out 3 days later is appropriate. I think give it 1 to 2 weeks, whereas in other industries, I think 3 days might be fully appropriate. I'm not sure. But I think giving it 1 to 2 weeks before you follow up again is the smart way to go. And then if it's something like Frieze, which is coming up, on the one hand, it would be great to reach out to someone now because there are plenty of events coming up and you can suggest going to one of these events with that person. However, if they don't get back to you, honestly, if they work in a gallery or an auction house, or if they work at Frieze, like for the art fair, I would honestly just say don't expect to receive a response for potentially even a month, just because in this period, this is the busiest period in the London art world. And so the last thing people are going to be prioritizing are coffee meetups with people who want to get advice or who want to network. And so that's just the reality of it. And so it is really just gauging that and thinking about the context. If you're looking to connect with someone in the New York art world, November is not a great time to be getting in touch and expecting or wanting an answer the week after, because people are really underwater. But I would always say, do not be afraid to follow up. It's just thinking about timing and how you follow up, but always do follow up. So case study number 2, event networking scenario, meeting new people at a gallery opening. So you're in a situation where you're attending an exhibition opening where you don't know that many people, and you have the goal of making 2 to 3 meaningful new connections. And I've provided a little networking toolkit here for you. I would suggest preparing a one-liner introduction prepared in advance about you. I would say 1 to 2 sentences so that you can really distill who you are and what you do when you're introducing yourself. And, you know, coming from experience, it does sometimes take some practice, because I remember when I was starting out in the industry, I just had no idea what I should say. It's like, well, I'm studying, but I'm also working part-time, but I'm also like doing this internship, but I also run a podcast. What do I do? So just think a little bit about how you present yourself. Also prepare some conversation starters about the exhibition, because I think that it's always good to have a couple of questions in your back pocket to ask somebody. And then another thing I would suggest is business cards, or an easy contact exchange method. I personally have, I don't know if you can see this, but a QR code on my phone that people can scan, and then it adds my contact details with my website, my email address, my phone number, obviously, my socials. It adds it as a contact card in their phone. And so they have all of the information. And then I would also say develop a mental note-taking strategy for remembering names, because sometimes it's so easy to shake someone's hand and say, hi, I'm Alexandra. And then you're focusing so much on making sure you get your one-liner out that you forget the other person's name. It goes in one ear and out the other. So developing a little bit of a strategy for that can be very beneficial. I've included some examples of what you can do to spark a conversation with someone you don't know at an exhibition opening. What do you think of this specific artwork if you're both looking at the same artwork? How do you know the artist/gallery is a really great conversation starter. Or, of course, the classic introducing yourself. I'm Alexandra. I run the All About Art podcast. What brings you here tonight? Some exhibition networking do's and don'ts. Do know how to exit gracefully. It's a lot, I guess, harder than it sounds, funnily enough. I've definitely been in situations where I didn't know how to exit gracefully, and then I exited very awkwardly. But saying something like, hey, it was wonderful meeting you. I'm going to go to the back of the gallery now. Or I actually haven't seen the paintings upstairs. I'm going to go and explore that. But I would love to connect and continue the conversation sometime over coffee. Shall we exchange socials, or shall we exchange phone numbers? And that way you're exiting gracefully, you're getting their contact details, and you're making sure that you also get to go see the rest of the exhibition. In line with what I just said earlier about mental note-taking strategies for names, writing down names and details as soon as you can be really useful. So I use my phone's notes app. And then I would suggest following up within 48 hours while the meeting is fresh, and reference something specific from your conversation. Don't look over people's shoulders. And it happens so often. I'm guilty of it, because I get quite overwhelmed in like really busy exhibition opening environments. And so my eyes just like wander, but it feels like you're looking for a better conversation partner. So if you feel like you're getting distracted, if there's a bunch of people moving behind the person that you're speaking to and you're not looking them in the eye, try to practice active listening and look them in the eye and just be present in the conversation, and try not to get distracted by your surroundings. Don't have closed posture. So avoid crossing your arms or checking your phone frequently, because you'd be surprised at the subconscious effect of body language. Don't always stay in familiar groups. Move around, because that's how you're going to meet more people, and that's how you're going to make sure to see all the art. And don't gossip. The art world is small, and reputation and discretion are important. The reason why I included this is from experience, and just from people telling me different things in terms of what they've experienced when they're networking. This sort of list is collected through years of talking to people about how they network and what they should and shouldn't do. And gossip is one of them. Third one to go through, and I am just going to fly over this really quickly in the interest of time. Alternative networking scenarios beyond gallery events and online. So there are artist studio visits where you can build relationships directly with artists, and that is so valuable. Art fairs are great places. They're really busy commercial environments, but it's typically where the key art world players tend to congregate. Educational events, lectures, panel discussions, workshops are so valuable for not only developing your own knowledge, but then also developing a network of like-minded people. And then, of course, I have to include membership organizations like NextGen, where we place a specific focus on networking. As Christina said this morning, there is a large group of lovely NextGen members who are currently at Tate Modern getting a tour of the Dohosa exhibition. So yeah, it's a really, really great place to actually like develop your network and enjoy the various events that we organize. But there are so many places that you can build your network authentically, and it's just finding the right thing for you. Key takeaways to round us off. Networking is relationship building, not just contact collecting. Online connections should always aim for offline meetings. Preparation and authenticity are your best tools. So find the sweet spot where you feel the most comfortable. If you don't want to prepare, different conversation starters at an exhibition opening because that's not how you like to network, that's totally fine. Follow-ups is where relationships actually begin. So if you meet someone at an event, that's not going to be what solidifies someone in thinking about you for a future opportunity. The thing that's going to solidify that is when you actually follow up with them, when you maybe have a one-on-one, when you develop a bit more of a relationship, and that's what's going to solidify it. And then finally, quality connections matter more than quantity. Thank you so much. I put my contact details there on the slide. So if anyone wants to get in touch with me after this, please feel free. But otherwise, I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Thank you so much, Alexandra. We've got about a quarter of an hour for questions, and there are a number coming in. Can people continue writing your questions in the Q&A box? I'm going to invite all the panelists back on, if you can switch your camera and mic back on. And I'm going to start with a thought that I had for you, Alexandra, because I can see from the questions that we've got a number of people here who really are just starting out, maybe they're A-level students or undergraduates. And I'm thinking back to myself, maybe you're a kind of queen of networking now, but that's come from years of practice and experience. But if you can try and sort of think back to those very early days, I personally found it quite terrifying. I remember going to the Association for Art History annual conference and not knowing anybody, or maybe just sort of one or two other students, and kind of setting myself a goal of I'm going to stay in this coffee break for 10 minutes and see how I get on before I might sort of have to go for a walk or disappear. But I'm going to kind of make that commitment for 10 minutes and see how it goes, and then maybe I end up staying longer. Do you have any thoughts for anyone who's kind of actually finding this quite terrifying?
Absolutely. I think number one is to remind yourself that we all sort of find it terrifying. Because I definitely, even though thinking about, I'm quite extroverted. And so for me, that was always something that was not much of a struggle. However, I will say that there are different networking opportunities for whatever makes you feel most comfortable. So if you really feel overwhelmed at exhibition openings or at a big conference or something like that, on the one hand, it's good to push your boundaries and to try things that you might be uncomfortable with. I think that that's always a really good thing. And that's where preparing these one-liners, preparing these levels of communication where you can talk to people, that is always something that can then massively benefit you in feeling a little bit more confident in going up to someone at such a busy, in such a busy environment. But on the other hand, there are other ways that you can connect. I'm just thinking about, and I'm just going to draw on my experiences with what we do at NextGen, but we have a lot of online events like this one. And sometimes the online events are a little bit more intimate. We have smaller groups, let's say, with around 10 people. And because it's a small group, we can, in the Q&A session, we can turn our cameras on and we can have a bit more of a discussion. And then if someone feels a bit more comfortable in their own home, speaking to a smaller group of people and then connecting with people afterwards via email or social media, that's a way that you can connect with people without being thrown into a really busy social environment. And so it's kind of thinking about alternative ways, but I will stress that no matter what you do, you can't wait for something to come to you. You have to be confident enough in whatever situation you feel comfy in to put yourself out there, to ask a question, to say hello, to reach out to someone. And that is what's going to get the ball rolling.
Yeah, I think, yeah, being interested in other people, rather than just kind of wanting to, here's all about me. Having a
Sorry,
genuine interest in the people you're there. Yes, I mean.
Just to add to what you were saying there, Alexandra, something that I did when I first started going to these events, that I was the same. I found it very daunting and quite intimidating sometimes. But the way I did it is just like strategize before you go. I used to do a thing where I'd say, look, I'm going to speak to 5 people today. I'm feeling confident today. I'm going to speak to 5 people. Once I've spoken to those 5 people, I can relax. And actually what happens is you end up speaking to more people because you reach your target and then you're relaxed. And it kind of, for me, it like broke those barriers a little bit and just allowed you to kind of, set like a very attainable goals. Like, I think that's, careers in general, I think it's really important to set like achievable, attainable goals. And especially in these networking spaces, if you're not feeling that good that evening, like, I want to speak to 2 people, and then you do that, and it's really valuable. I found in those spaces.
Thank you. And sort of sticking with this theme of just being someone who's just starting out, I think Diana and Ricky, you both covered this, but there's still a little bit of anxiety coming through in some of the questions. So Ricky, if there's a question here, if you are someone who's just starting out and you're just still finding out what your passion is, you're still studying, should you be building a personal brand, or would it be better to actually wait until you kind of really know what you're passionate about or where you want to get to in your career?
I think there's sort of 2 things I'd say to that. First of all, I think you can always have a plan of what you want your career to do, but I think it's understanding that things will grow flexibly, and the career I have now is not the career I expected to have 2 years ago. And I think sometimes if you lock yourself too much into something, you can prevent opportunities that you might not expect. I think I've seen the question in the chat. I think it's all relevant to sort of early pre-university sort of point of life. One thing you can do is you can build your personal brand without sharing your personal brand. So even if that means having a private Instagram where you document the exhibitions you go to and you write a couple thoughts down to yourself, it's a really useful resource and quite an easy resource that when it comes to applying to universities or for applying for jobs, you actually already have a database for yourself of all the things you've engaged with. It can be quite hard sometimes when you sit down in front of a computer to remember everything that you do and enjoy. So if you keep that resource, you don't have to make it public. You can just keep it as a private thing. It's a bit more intuitive, I think, for a lot of younger people to sort of just use an Instagram page. But then you already have a bank of things you've attended and exhibition thoughts that you've gathered and research that you've done, that you can then, when you want to put a public brand sort of more out there into the world, to universities, to employers, you can sort of work from something rather than work for nothing. I think that's the advice I'd give.
Great idea, thank you. And Diana, again, thinking about people who are just starting out, what can they put on their CV, cover letter, if they're, if they're an A-level student or sort of still doing their undergraduate studies?
I think it's such a good point. I think it's really important to speak to your current A-level or your undergrad experience on where you are now. And I think it's really good to always be trying to keep your hand in like doing working alongside your undergraduate, for example, where you can, trying to get some sector relevant experience as well, and don't be afraid of including that in your CV and your cover letter. So for example, if you are a class rep, or you set up an art historical society, for example, you're actively engaging with extracurricular, I would really make a point of doing that. Seek out what's available during your undergraduate time. For example, the Peggy Guggenheim Scholarship is a really good thing to look at, and make sure that you go for all the opportunities that are available to you during your time while you're actively at university, so that you can start building that experience going forward on your CV.
It's reminded me of the art society that I set up with an undergraduate. I've some quite hilarious memories of that.
I think I would want to just chime in at the end of that. I graduated not a huge amount of time, less than 5 years ago, and I think people in the art world can often get frustrated about what resources there are available. Cannot stress this enough, but do rely on your careers advisors. There are so many resources set up by incredible devoted teams of individuals, and I think that you get as much out as you put in. I think all of the people I know who are not necessarily where they want to be, but close to where they want to be, are people that went out, made use of those resources, spoke to careers advisors, lent on others. So I would, just echo Diane there as somebody that's experienced it recently. Invaluable resource.
And then at the other end of the scale, I think we've got some career changers with us. And Diana, I know you have a lot of students at Sotheby's Institute who come from other industries, finance, law, for example, all sorts of different industries. So what can someone do if they've got lots of experience, but none of it's actually in the art world? How can they tailor their CV to make that kind of pivot?
I think it's really important to highlight that employers within the creative industries are looking for a broad range of people. So I think that having extensive experience in a different sector is really useful, and you want to highlight what you can bring. Do your research, identify the areas of interest that the art world, what it means to you personally, do your research, and then you need to pivot and show why your work experience to date will essentially play into that, and how that's going to, make you a valuable person to be part of that all. But you do speak to the fact that at Sotheby's Institute of Art, we do have a number of career transitioners, and I think that that there is an element of immersion that's required here, and you can do that through your own proactive activities. We've had some brilliant discussions today. For example, the cultural world of London, there's so much to go and see. You can go to private view openings, you can join memberships, you can really work hard to immerse yourself within the industry. There's a lot of talk about how hard it is to break into. My experience is people are very open and they want to share their experience, so you can reach out to people that are of interest to you. But I do think building your networks are really important, and if we're talking about using your career service and using your peers, it's the first thing I say to my students when they join us. Look around the room. These are going to not just be your friends, but they're going to be your networks. They're going to be your colleagues going forward. I think if you've got significant career experience and you're of an age, you want to think about considering further studies. And I think that's why people do come to us, for example, at the Institute, because our MAs are very industry facing, and it's a genuine opportunity during that year to immerse yourself within industry and to build that network very quickly. So I think these kinds of master programs that are available in the UK are incredibly valued when they are clearly aligned with industry. And I think that would be something I would suggest to strongly advise someone if they were in a position to be able to resource that. There is also obviously scholarships and things available out there, but I would seriously consider some further study in that instance, but targeted. Think about the sort of university you're looking at and why you're going there. Be really clear on your motivations.
Thank you. There's a question here about if you live outside of London or the big cities, Do you have any hints or tips of what to do, you know, if you haven't got so much kind of job opportunities close to where you live? Is there any hope for you? I guess anyone could chime in on this.
Yeah, I mean, so I actually grew up outside of London. I grew up in like a pretty rural place near Basingstoke. Like there wasn't really much going on there. I think just to echo what Diana just said, and I think to kind of instigate artistic moments and show passion is a really good starter for those spaces. Being able to like think creatively about the space and the things that you want to do within that space and really self-start yourself. I mean, the reality is the big cities hold a lot of the jobs. That being said, you know, the more that kind of opportunities develop, and there are certain spaces that I think Diana actually highlighted earlier on with regards to like recruitment spaces and specific job opportunities, kind of web pages and stuff like that. There are a lot more opportunities outside of London that I'm seeing now. So my real advice with regards to that would be think about how you can use your immediate vicinity to bolster your own passion and to bolster your own CV in a way that conveys your interest and passion in whatever you want to do within the art world. Think creatively about that. You know, I look through lots of applications. I do a lot of hiring at Arctic, and it shows when people think creatively about their own situation, you know, and I think that's something to really like consider within the space. So that's in your immediate vicinity, what I'd say with regards to that, you know, even just like organizing like a thing in a town hall, you know, just like something along that, work with communities, like think about how you can kind of interact with artistic moments within your immediate vicinity. And then what I'd say is, with regards to that, just casting it slightly wider into the next kind of big town and look at those opportunities that are coming through there. Look at the cultural institutions that are in there. You know, that cultural institution might be a youth centre. It might be like something along those kind of lines, just to get your foot in the door and start working in those spaces in order to gain a relevant experience to kind of aim higher is what I would say in those spaces, kind of what I do. Yeah.
If I could actually chime in there as well, just following Henry, which I think is such valuable advice. And like the Arts Council, when they're allocating funding, one of their biggest goals from what their key principles has been over the last couple of years has been to decentralize art from London as well. And this is where, I mean, I'm sorry that I'm plugging NextGen again, but we did think about this when launching NextGen. There's a reason why we do a lot of our events online, and it's because I wanted people who didn't live in London, because London's expensive, it's hard to move to, like it's not an easy city. And so I wanted people to be able to access a lot of the information. And so we do a lot of online events, but then we also put like key takeaways and summaries and event recordings up on our website, and people can put NextGen on their CV. So if you live outside of London and you want to gain information, you want to meet people, albeit digitally, take that first step, you want to have something on your CV that has to do with art, there you go. And it's not just NextGen. There are a lot of different, you know, doing things with the Association for Art History, attending this event like today. These sorts of things is how you can remotely start to get, you know, gain an education outside of, you know, higher education institutions, where you can actually start to gain industry knowledge. And you can build on that once you get into those spaces, like in bigger cities, like Henry said, or in, of course, a huge metropolis like London.
Could I just chime in on this too? Oh, sorry, Ricky.
No, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Just from a jobs perspective as well, interestingly, work really closely with the recruiters that you mentioned. And in fact, Draw specializes in recruiting in the regional areas. And we have a blog post on a jobs board, which is a very insightful post by Julia Henderson about exactly this, the opportunities that are available regionally that often people overlook. So a number of auction houses are really looking for people to hire currently because they're not finding people with the skills. So do not overlook the rest of the UK in terms of really exciting job opportunities. And I also want to draw attention to these, wonderful developments that we see happening all the time. So Margate's a great example of that as a sort of real cultural hub down by the coast in the east, where, southeast, where, there is so much going on there. There's a lot of opportunities. So I think that, there is always a sort of tussle between London and the other regions, but there are opportunities out there. You just have to know where to find them and have a really good look for them.
Thank you. Thanks for everyone for chiming in on that question. We're sort of out of time, but I just wanted to take one more question from China. Not the country, the name is the name of the person. This is a question for Alexandra. She says, can you be direct about asking what you want from the person that you're connecting with? Or is it a case of making friends and then hoping the connection will lead to something? Because I was very struck with the statement that you wrote out, or the sort of the bit of text that you shared with us as an example, where you were sort of saying, would you like to join me at so-and-so a place? But without kind of saying, actually, I'm really hoping to, I'm in undergraduate and I'm hoping to seek your advice on sort of getting into this field.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I do think that if you're an undergraduate and you want advice, to put that in the message is important. That was more of a generic message that someone could send, because if someone wants to meet up because maybe they want to collaborate on something, or maybe they just want to have someone and get to know them a little bit better in their circle, I think that those sorts of things are really valuable to include. So the message was very generic to reach a lot of different people with different goals. I do think that it's great to put in what your intentions are so that the person that you're asking knows what they're getting into. So saying, I want to get advice, I want to ask you about XYZ, I want to find out more about this. This is my goal, and I'd love to ask you about how you got to this goal. All of that, brilliant to include in an initial message. I think that is actually, the more you can include, just obviously not overwhelming with text, but the better. I think that that's great. One thing I will say is, don't expect to get a job, or don't expect to ask someone for a job. I think there's the distinction. You're asking them to share their advice, not asking them to give you something. So there's that distinction there that I think is very important to make when having that soft skill of like being able to know where that line is drawn. And then I would say that oh, I had another point and then I forgot once well, that was the main point anyway, but it's definitely important to keep that in mind. And then, yeah, to not, oh, that was my point. I was going to talk about, I have this metaphor that I love to use, and it's about planting seeds and it's about growing a garden. And what I love to tell everyone that asks me for advice about networking, and it's a very broad metaphor, but it's every single message that you send, every single person that you meet at an exhibition opening, every single event that you attend, you're planting seeds. And honestly, some seeds, you're going to plant it and you're going to water it the recommended amount, and it's going to grow into a little plant. Some seeds you're going to plant and you're going to water it once, and then it's going to sprout into this huge oak tree, right? You just had to water it once, and then it created this big thing. And then some seeds you're going to plant and you're going to water it and you're going to water it and you're going to water it, and then it's going to die. And sometimes you don't have control over that. It's also, you're networking with other people. It's other people reacting to different things. And so sometimes it's not about you. Sometimes you did overwater it. Sometimes you watered it the perfect amount. Sometimes you barely watered it and you didn't expect that result. And so part of it's so not fully in your control. It's just remembering to, as I said, know where that line is drawn with what's appropriate and what isn't. As I said, not appropriate to be like, I want a job. Can we talk about this? people don't know you. Like someone recently asked me for for me to be their reference for a job. And I said, I've never met you in person. I've never worked with you. Unfortunately, I will not be recommending you because I can't do that in good faith. And so it's just knowing what's appropriate in those situations, but always include like, hey, this is my goal. I want to ask you questions. That's always great.
Well, yeah, thank you for clarifying that, but also for the lovely metaphor of the seed and plants for us to end on. Thank you so much, all of you, for giving up your time this Saturday morning. Really, really appreciate it. I know everyone watching does as well. And thank you everyone for all your questions as well. I'm sorry we haven't been able to get through all of them, but hopefully we've covered a good spread. Diana, thanks for offering to share your presentation. So I'll send that out so everyone's got the links in your lovely lists of things to follow up on. And I'll send the link to NextGen as well, and our team. And also the presentation for this event has been recorded and we'll put it up onto YouTube, onto the Association for Art History's YouTube channel in October. So thank you everyone for coming. Have a look, enjoy the rest of your weekend, and I hope it's been useful to you all. Good luck.
Thank
with
you.
your
I
next
just
steps.
put my email address in the chat should anyone